Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Esther Mopariola. In a continent where democratic process is a regular event, the people file out to decide the ruling party who shows up to win, and the opposition takes position on a playing field that is often far from even. The future of opposition party politics in most parts of Africa is said to be bleak, where the challenge of funding, weak institutions and political regression makes it difficult to appeal to the electorate. And prior to Uganda's election in February, there were reports of opposition leaders and their supporters being harassed, tear-gassed and arrested, even as many continue to raise concerns on political developments in the East African region. So we ask, what are your thoughts on the state of opposition politics across Africa? You can join the conversation and share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC Connect. Well, here's a report to launch the program, and Africa Today will be right back. Welcome.
Ugandan opposition leader Kizza Besigye has been relieved of one of the cases against him after the state withdrew the disobedience of lawful orders charges at the court in the capital, Kampala. The leader of the Forum for Democratic Change protested the withdrawal of the charges, calling it a total abuse of power. But the prosecution team told the court that they have the right to withdraw charges against anyone. Besigye's lawyer wants the case to continue to avoid any later implications by the state. The charges on disobedience of lawful orders were filed against Besigye for leading a demonstration not sanctioned by the police.
So I'm extremely concerned by the delay ending the investigations in this case. I pointed out further that I am concerned about threats to my life. The worship had given 2 weeks for this matter to be, for the investigations to be concluded. So I really hope that the investigations in this matter can be given a time frame within which they should conclude that. If they have any case at all, which I doubt, that they present it to court.
Besigye, who claimed fraud after coming second in February's presidential election, was arrested on May the 11th for staging his own inauguration ahead of President Yoweri Museveni's swearing-in and charged with treason. A long-standing opponent of Museveni, Besigye has been frequently jailed, placed under house arrest, accused of both treason and rape, tear-gassed, beaten and hospitalized over the years.
Welcome back. In Ethiopia, Rwanda, Burundi and Uganda, the opposition is said to be at risk of becoming insignificant as the rules of engagement leaves little or no room for fair contest and political inclusion. Joining me on Africa Today in the studio, I have Daniel Akinlabi, a Nigerian politician, youth leader and a political analyst. It's a pleasure having you as always on Africa Today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here again.
And on Skype, I have Dr. Nakad Lagoke, a US-based Ivorian political analyst and founder of the Revival of Pan-Africanism Forum, and he joins us from Washington, D.C. It's a pleasure having you to join us on Africa Today.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity, Esther.
Right, so Daniel, how would you describe the level of the strength of political parties? Or let me put it this way. African leaders are known to have this knack to hold on to power for so long. Why is it so, even in the face of opposition parties which are there to, well, show them the way out?
Well, I think this is one major issue we've been battling with in Africa for the past 5 decades. And I think we truly need a leader that will redefine leadership in Africa, that can influence the continent, that is exemplary lifestyle in leadership, and the selflessness can spread to every corner of the continent. Be that as it is now, we have some sort of democracies being, democratic system being practiced all over the continent that you cannot distinguish from dictatorship, autocracy, and all sorts of things that these leaders are doing. And coming to the issue of the opposition, to be sincere, opposition politics is like not existing in Africa.
Why is it so?
Now, why so is that look at most of the countries that have been having issues democratically lately, from Burundi to Uganda to Rwanda and even Zimbabwe for years. I could remember for a time Morgan Tsvangirai had to push through for almost 20-something years to come close to defeating the Zimbabwe leader Mugabe. And it took many of these people a lot, even some their lives, to challenge the sitting government. Now, we've got a kind of culture in Africa whereby the opposition has been totally silenced. Look at what happened in Burundi last year. With all the agitation, with all the protests that the opposition parties mounted to stop the Burundi leader, they marched on, suppressed them by every way. The same thing with Rwanda too. The opposition parties made serious move to stop the amendment of the constitution to give tenure elongation to the Rwanda president. But the same, they were suppressed. So this is the serious issue we have. I'm not sure we are yet ready or serious to practice democracy in Africa, because what we have is strong men. We don't have strong institutions in Africa.
All right, let me hold your thoughts. Let's bring in Dr. Naka Dlakoke, who joins me from Washington, D.C. Naka, well, what do you think are the major challenges with being in the opposite side of most political parties in Africa?
Thank you very much, Esther. I believe that we have different reasons, that can explain, the weakness of the difficulty that the opposition parties are having in Africa. The first reason is this: the level of, the efficiency or the inefficiency of the political parties in Africa are the reflection of the state of democracy, or the state of the lack of democracy in Africa. In other words, because we see a growing number of authoritarian regimes in Africa, in Ethiopia, in Uganda, in Zimbabwe. Even though Mugabe is seen by many as somebody who is standing for Africa against neocolonialism, and in Ivory Coast, because of the fact that the leaders in power are doing everything, to suppress the opposition. Then this is one of the first reason, that can explain, the weakness of the opposition in Africa. First, second, I believe that the opposition in Africa suffers also for the substantial weakness of the political parties themselves. What I'm trying to say is that there are 120 ways to do civil disobedience in Africa, in the world. Civil disobedience like in a country. But we do not see, those political parties being innovative and then inventing and finding different ways, to express themselves. And many think that they have to rally people during an election, to come to power. But they should focus on the democratization of the state before hoping, in order to have access to power. So this is what I would say, to explain what is happening to our opposition in Africa.
All right, in a nutshell, I seem to get to quite to understand that the opposition is having a little bit of challenge there in showing forth its uniqueness or its strength, to be in the front of politics. But are you saying that the strategy is being adopted by the opposition isn't strong enough to appeal to the electorate?
Yes. Yes, it's different, because the opposition. I'm going to just give you an example. All right. Today, For instance, you gave the example of Nigeria. You give an example about Ivory Coast. You give an example about South Africa. The people who are in power, they have the support and the strength of all the layers of the state. So if somebody wants to run to come and become maybe a leader or president of a country, I think that that leader should have a strong appeal that can go beyond ethnic groups, beyond ideological groups, but we do not see that. This is one thing. Second, I believe that people are not elevating the conversation. And then because in the case of Zimbabwe, we know that Mugabe stayed in power too long. And then maybe Tsvangirai might have won an election, or he may even win an election one day in Zimbabwe. But Tsvangirai is seen in Zimbabwe and outside Zimbabwe as somebody who is siding with neo-colonial forces. And there are many people in Africa who who cherish the issue of the national sovereignty and then of the economic and political independence of Africa. So this can be a weakness in the case of Zimbabwe and a weakness in different other parts of Africa.
All right, let's hold your thoughts there, Dr. Nakat Lagoke. We will come back with more discussions on this particular issue. We've been looking at opposition political parties, the strength of opposition political parties across Africa. Let's go on this quick break and be back with more on this. Welcome back. Ahead of upcoming local elections in South Africa, two opposition parties, the Democratic Alliance and the Economic Freedom Fighters, are looking for ways to take out the ruling African National Congress. Perhaps a positive outcome for the opposition could usher in the beginning of an era in the Rainbow Nation, possibly inspired by political developments in Nigeria in the last 1 year. Daniel, this issue indeed, it brings to thought one to bear that, South Africa seems to be the only country in Africa where the opposition seems to thrive. But what do you make of this development?
Well, I think for some times now, we've not really seen the strength of the opposition in South Africa. There are some bigwigs of ANC that have left the party, tried their hand in starting some movement outside of ANC, but they've not been able to come close to getting required number to achieve a proper opposition movement.
Are you saying the DA and the EFF are not strong enough to take out the ANC?
Some of these African countries should learn from what happened in Nigeria 2015, general elections.
Okay.
And I think some of the challenges that many of them are facing is simply because they couldn't form a coalition. That's part of their own doing. Now, during the Nigeria 2015 election, about 4 major political parties came together to make a formidable opposition to PDP, which eventually led to the fall of PDP in Nigeria. So I think for South Africa to really go to that direction, freedom fighters and the other political parties, they need to come together. There are more other parties as well that don't have up to the strength of the freedom fighters and those other ones in the parliament. So they should gather the support that can form a coalition. So if they can increase the strength to confront the SSCs of the sitting government and fight for the institutions. And part of the institution they can fight for is the electoral system. So it's until the opposition parties stand up and fight for the institutions before they can have the leeway to bring in a change of government or to bring in new policies into the government. So, but as it is now, it has been like an individual race. Maybe if we take some few countries, maybe in West Africa, Ghana has been doing well. Election in Ghana now is about wit and smartness and diplomacy and policies and what you are bringing on board. So to a large extent, opposition can come into election and win in Ghana today. So the same thing that happened in Nigeria in 2015. So I believe most of the countries in East Africa, where we have some of these issues with tenure elongation and all those constitutional amendments recently, they need to look inward, especially the opposition parties. Oftentimes, most of these countries, we have about 2-3 parties leading the opposition. Oftentimes, they do it individually. And the sitting government cannot be removed in such a way.
So in other words, a collective.
So they need to have a coalition.
Okay.
So they need to come together, work together, and fight for their institutions. Because when they get institutions, then they can have a regime change.
All right, Dr. Nakad Lagoke, I assume you've heard my guest in the studio giving his own thoughts on what he thinks can make the opposition stronger. Do you buy into his arguments?
Yeah, it was because of maybe the sound was that I could not hear him. So can you summarize what?
All right,
what
he is positing that a coalition of major political parties in Africa can be able to oust any sitting government. What do you have to add to that?
Of course, I will agree with him with the case of Nigeria. But I think that it is not just about ousting a sitting government. The most important thing, for us in any country in Africa, this is what I was saying in the beginning, the opposition has to come with a strong vision. And then in the case of South Africa, we have the impression that the opposition seems to be doing a little bit better over there because, as I said at the beginning, of the level of democracy. After the dismantling of the apartheid regime, and then the accession to power of Nelson Mandela, who put into place a multiracial and multicultural democracy in South Africa, then most of the groups in the society, in the political life, if they want to organize, they have the right to do so. And maybe also because with a concept that is resonating in South Africa, because they are talking to the poor and the marginalized in South Africa. That's why the recent election, the Economic Freedom Fighters will have, I think, 6% of the votes in South Africa. But again, they can find a platform and then with a strong vision. And then if they really mean to do the right thing in order to solve the issues that the people are dealing with, I think this is the right way in order to come to power in South Africa or in any country in Africa.
All right, but in countries like Zimbabwe, where they do not find this perception or this initiatives or these ideas rather achievable or workable, what options is open to them now? Because the opposition in Zimbabwe, in Uganda, in Burundi seem to be a little bit stifled. How can they rise against this, surmounting these challenges which seems to stare them in the face?
The best option, I think, is to organize. And people have to organize. They have to come with some innovative ways, to fight for freedom. And they should not be focusing on having access to power. I believe that they have to fight, to expand the freedoms and the liberties of the people, and they have to fight, to build into true democratic societies. And then, if they do so, and this is what Nelson Mandela did, then, that's the sure way for them to have access to power.
All right, Dr. Nakad Lagoke, we have to leave it there. We appreciate sincerely for your contributions on the program. Well, Daniel, you've just heard Dr. Nakad Lagoke giving his own extensive analysis on what he thinks is the best principle to adopt in countries where opposition do not find the opportunities to strive. But what would you have to add?
But I think they need to have a synergized movement. And in the sense that one man, one party cannot do it alone. Many of these countries, the sitting government controls the electoral body. Now, they oppress and suppress many of these opposition movements.
Right.
Many of them are arrested and thrown into jail.
True.
So these people need to put their energy together. And the best way they can bring reforms to many of these countries is to go for the institutions. That's why
institutions like what
I like what the Kenya opposition are doing now about the electoral body.
Okay.
They are making it clear before the election comes next year that the body, the members of the electoral body should be changed. They are compromised, and they are not joking about it. So many other countries as well. You cannot even see some of this opposition going into election with the hope of winning. The apparatus of the electoral body is controlled by government. The members of the body of the electoral commission is appointed by the sitting government. So they need to go for the institutions first. If they can begin to get the institutions independent of their government, then their voices will begin to be heard. So that is one way. So when they are coming on board, like you rightly said, it's not just about opposition for opposition's sake. It depends on the vision, the reforms they are bringing on board. There are so many issues on ground right now. Many of these countries, we have sit-tight leaders who are ready to kill anyone to retain power. So many people have died in the process of fighting these individuals. So, but this time around, many of these political parties, they need to work together. And not just for winning election. They should fight for the democratic institutions of their countries.
All right. Right. But aside from all this now, what roles do you think individuals, communities, and of course larger societies can play to ensure that opposition in African countries today become what they are supposed to be?
Well, I think it starts more with the political parties. They dictate the movement, oftentimes, everywhere. I think what they need to do is for them to come up with ideas and ideas that can propel the people. So if an opposition does not have anything better to offer than the sitting government, then the people will not be moved. So they need to come up with visions, ideals, principles that can move the people. But when you show the people the path to the future, they will rise up and join the movement.
All right, Mr. Daniel Akilami, a political analyst. And of course, we appreciate your contributions on the program.
Thank you.
Well, in recent years, a few countries like Mauritius, Botswana, and Namibia have grown to become classic examples of functioning states that allows a democratic participation and representation of opposition parties. Africa has the potential to leapfrog on development where the opponent is not a threat, and being in the opposition is not at all about winning, but holding government accountable and stimulating national consciousness. And that's our package for today. But don't forget to join the conversation as usual on Twitter at TVC Connect. And also follow me for updates around Africa at Esther TVC News. Until the next one again, I am Esther Mokwariola, and always remember, this is Africa. Bye for now. Thank you.